and politics.
Everyone hates war and politics.
But dress them up as anime, manga, or TV shows, and now everybody's interested.
After all, these topics result in humanity's darkest moments.
Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
But at the same time, while these are genuinely messed up things, they're inherently human.
Something that helps in creating interesting stories is having the audience experience humanity at its extreme.
Be it good or bad, and great stories juggle and show the good and bad sides. So having a story revolving around war and politics is bound to grab your interest. So it can be a completely fictional world with different races and fantasy elements that just add more to the drama, thus resulting on us being hooked on the premise but not personally affected.
Or it can be from history, so you get completely indulged in the story. Enter Kingdom. History has always been very interesting and intriguing to me. After all, what happened resulted in the world being the way it is right now.
It's crazy to think that just one man's actions can lead to one of the biggest and strongest countries ever, even right now. That man was
Ying-Zhang.
or if you're a weeb, Issei, and his sword Rishin. They had a goal which was to unify all the states, resulting in China. And to someone in the time of 221 BC, that was absolute insanity, because at the time it was an era of the 7 warring states, with each having their respective massive strong armies. Although it might not be the most accurate in terms of actual history, it definitely gives the right feel. And guess what? It is one of the best manga. But you probably didn't hear much about it, even though it's one of the best-selling manga ever. In 2020 alone, it sold 8.2 million copies, only to be topped by Demon Slayer in that year. There is also the fact that the mangaka behind it, Hara, was an assistant for the GOAT Tahiko Inoue on one of his best works, Real. Hara even says that Inoue is his mentor in the manga world, and they even had an interview about it. Kingdom is one hype manga.
You know Aaron's speech and everything that makes it good? The characters behind it, the way it strikes a chord with the soldiers, and how it literally makes them run straight to their death. And of course, the amount of hype and adrenaline it gives the soldiers and us. So imagine everything that makes those scenes great, but a full manga. It genuinely feels like you're the one participating in the war.
From the speeches the generals give, or the way the large-scale battles are drawn, even the facial expressions of the soldiers on both sides, it feels like you're shooting adrenaline into your veins.
It's not a coincidence that the best war manga is also the most hype, because in war,
a soldier's morale can win or lose the whole war, so generals or the people in command need to raise the morale. But that's not the only thing that makes Kingdom an absolute adrenaline intake.
Hara just has a special way of making readers hype.
From nail-biting duels between top fighters, the result of which can be the cause of the whole kingdom's destruction, to chapters that are just pure dialogue with people addressing each other's ideologies and either proving or proving against it. I think one of the main things that make it so hyped to read is the level of stakes that are on the line. And it almost never feels like the stakes are forced. Something that makes you feel the stakes is the pacing. If you don't know what pacing is, to simply put it, pacing is the rate at which story elements are introduced relative to each other. Basically, the speed at which the story progresses, be it fast or slow, depending on what's needed for a story at a certain point. We can see that from the very first chapter, and an introduction usually needs fast pacing. We start off having 2 young peasants practicing swordplay with each other, saying that they'll become great generals of the heavens. Then a few pages later, wham, we have one of them being recruited at the royal palace. Then right after, rumors spread that there is a revolt in the castle. Then the kid that was recruited at the palace is back and he's heavily injured, saying his heartfelt dying words to his best friend. Then boom, we're off to a different location, and what do we see in that location? The dead kid? Next chapter, we're hit with the realization that the kid was actually the king. What? And all this in just 2 chapters. Although this is really fast pacing, the pacing is not always like this. It adjusts to whatever the story needs it to be. It really feels like Hara mastered the art of pacing, which leads me to my next point: progression. Pacing is one thing, but with no good progression, then what's the point? Luckily in Kingdom we don't have that problem. They can't really have insane massive wars back to back, so we get 2 great techniques that Hara uses. First, training arcs. Wait, Kingdom actually has some of the best training arcs that I've seen in manga and anime. It's used to progress the story so the world doesn't stop just because the main character needs to have his training arc. He gets thrown into whatever his training is, then we move to other plot lines that set up the next big event or war. When that event comes, we get the main character back and he has a different feel to him. Then in the actual war, we see how he changed and progressed on a personal level or on a team level. After the war, we have him progress with getting awards and being promoted. Then comes comes the second way, which is time skips. After a massive war, there isn't going to be another massive war. That's not how the world works. So we get to see him and his crew evolve after just a few years. And it's never too long, so we don't feel like we missed something. It's just the perfect time. Also, one little note, Har has a great way to draw characters growing up. Speaking of characters, Kingdom has some of the best characters in anime and manga, starting from the protagonist all the way to some foot soldiers. I'll speedrun telling you a few of my favorites, but don't think that these are the only good characters. Okay, let's go. Shin is your Naruto type character. That's not to say that he's the generic dumb character that lacks depth, that can be farther from the truth, but at the same time he's not a Musashi or a Guts. I feel like he's a perfect in between. Seeing him evolve from the version foot soldier to the Chad general is one of the main enjoyments of the series. The other protagonist is the King Issei. He's by far one of my favorite characters ever. He's definitely in my top 5 of all time. It's not often that I come across a character that genuinely affects me on a personal level and changes some of my perspectives on some serious topics. He's one of the most impactful characters that I've come across. Going to the opposite side of the antagonist, we have Riboku, one of the smartest characters in storytelling, period. Like Shikamaru, get out of here. If there's one image to describe this man, it's this. Next we have this Chancellor, and the less said about him the better, just because I think the best way to experience his character is not to be spoiled. There's also no lack of S-tier female characters. They're not dumbed down to being fan service like most anime and manga. They're genuinely really good characters. Lastly, I want to talk about a character that's also in my top 5 characters of all time, and that's General Kanki. He made me question things like no other character has, and he possesses so many insane moral dilemmas. He's the type of character that sticks with you and makes you think about him for a long time. Whenever there's an arc that he's playing a prominent role, it instantly becomes one of my favorites. As a character, he embodies the dark side of war. Don't worry, I'll make a full video about him on a later date. Speaking of war arcs are always the best in their series. Okay, well maybe not always. But take One Piece for example, the Marineford saga is considered by most the best part, or Attack on Titan with the war between Paradis and Marley. So imagine a manga that's all about war and it's the best in its respective genre. The vast amount of different generals with unique styles. It feels like almost every general is 200 IQ plus, and it's so much fun reading the battles, seeing how each general is gonna try to outsmart the other. Like for real, Kingdom depicts war in such an entertaining way, and in some arcs it really doesn't shy away from the dark sides of war. A main reason that makes war so appealing in fiction is when the story humanizes the other side. After all, they have their reasons to fight. They also have families waiting for them to return. They have a home that they want to protect, and that's one of the main reasons to why the 4th Ninja War in Naruto flopped. We were literally fighting alien clones or dead people that are just being used. With Kingdom, Hara masterfully displays that and even has full arcs dedicated to that alone. Another reason war is such a great thing to be covered in stories is what makes this war justifiable. Or is it even justifiable? Are they genuinely needed and unavoidable? The last thing I want to talk about is why have war in the first place? And the answer to that is politics. In Kingdom, we see all the preparations for war, the benefits, the reasons why these battles are taking place, how alliances with other kingdoms happen and why they happen, and how they can be beneficial to each kingdom that's participating. It also covers a different time when the government was handled completely differently, like how the king had all the power and how one word from him can make or destroy a kingdom. We also get to see the inner conflict within the same government. We see different ideologies on how to govern a country and how to lead it to an era of peace. All this and so many more is covered in Kingdom. I hope this one video is the push that makes you read this masterpiece. I just want more people to experience the story and more people to talk about it. So if you like Kingdom, I suggest you subscribe because I'll be uploading regular Kingdom content on here, and I'm looking forward to that. Until then, later.